All right, so one of the first plugins that I use on pretty much every single track is just going to be the plain old channel EQ. This thing is pretty much stacked. I think as far as a graphic EQ goes, Logic did a really, really great job of giving you one that works. It functions exactly the way you kind of need it to. And it's easy to pick out what frequencies you're looking for visually on this thing. So let's check this guy out. So you can see right off the bat, this thing, it looks nice. It shows you the frequencies. There's a few things that you need to definitely go in and turn on by default. One of which is this analyzer in the post position, because you want to be able to see the impact of what your adjustments are doing to the actual sound. You can visually see that when you go in and scoop something out and you move it around, you can see right then and there on the analyzer what effect it's having to your sound. So I just recorded this little riff. Let's hear what it sounds like when I'm moving around in this thing. And I want to show you a few things that I personally really like about the channel EQ. Let's have a listen. Really useful, especially when you're mixing and you're trying to sweep around to find those oddball frequencies that are sticking out and making your sound a little less than pleasant. What's also nice about these types of EQs is you can really go in and do these wide sweeps. You can change that bell curve to basically whatever you want. So you can go from having it be super wide like this or super narrow. So you can either go in and do some surgical EQing on a specific frequency, or you can boost or cut a wide band of frequencies. This thing is pretty much the #1 plugin that gets used on every single track. As soon as you open a new track, no matter what instrument you put in there, you're going to drop a channel EQ on it just so you know what's going on frequency-wise. And when you're trying to dial in different guitar tones, this makes it really easy too, because right off the bat, you can hear this tone. Right? So in my opinion, sounds really good, but there's a lot of excess frequencies in there that you probably don't need. And this EQ makes it really easy to carve that stuff out. Some quick moves that instantly make your guitar tone sound awesome. Just bring this low pass down a little bit, somewhere in the ballpark of around 7K, in my opinion. Sometimes it could be up to 10K or more, whatever. Really depends on the type of tone you're going for. For me, I don't like a lot of really scratchy, hissy highs. I'll also bring this high pass up to about 80, in between 80 and 100 hertz, right? So somewhere in here, and then I will adjust that mid frequency a little bit, maybe bring up the high end a little bit, and you can hear it sounds like. So real subtle changes in there, but in the mix, it's going to make a huge difference because it's going to leave a lot of space for the other instruments. You can, of course, exaggerate this, do a lot of subtractive EQing, make it super scooped sounding. Or embellish some frequencies, make it very mid-heavy. It's just super easy to carve out basically any tone you need right there. Boom, built in, super powerful. The next built-in plugin is actually a pair of plugins, but it's the virtual pedal board and the virtual amp that's built into Logic Pro X. If I'm trying to get like a crispy clean, I can achieve that really, really well with the built-in amp sims that are happening in Logic. One of which is this. It's obviously a Vox copy. And basically, you can set up a virtual pedal board, put whatever effects you want to go in front of the amp, right there, route it in front of the amp over here, and then have it going into the amp. In this case, I've just got a compressor, and I'm going into the amp with a little reverb on there. I did some carving with the EQ, and this is what it sounds like. Really nice. And what's cool about this is you can play with this in a combination that's the exact same thing as a signal chain for your actual live rig. So if you activate a pedal board behind the amp as well as in front of the amp, it acts as though you're processing effects both before and after the amp. So it's really cool for things like delays and reverbs and stuff. So it's pretty cool. There's a lot of built-in standard effects fuzzes, delays, compressors, reverbs, choruses, flangers, all this good stuff. You can experiment with a lot of things. If you don't want to go out and buy a bunch of pedals to try things out or an expensive multi-processor, you kind of already have one right here. So if you're using Logic Pro X and you're a guitar player that's balling on a budget, you already have 90% of the things you need right here. But the amp plugin itself is very cool. You can switch between a bunch of different types of amps. You have the option to emulate all of the big brands from Mesa Boogie, Orange, PV5150s, Marshall amps, Fender amps, you name it. All the classics are in here. Some of them are better than others, but the clean and dirty style amps are really, really good. And on top of that, it's got a built-in cab sim. Not necessarily an IR loader. You can't load your own IRs into this, which is kind of disappointing, but you can disable the cabinet and go ahead and use another plugin like the Lancaster Audio Pulse IR loader if you want to use a different IR with this amp, which is cool. That's a great option. Again, that's another free plugin. I'll drop links below. Don't sleep on it. Go get it because it's worth it. But what's nice here is you get some different mic combinations, all your basic typical condenser mics into a ribbon mic, and then of course your dynamic mics like 57s and 609s. These are standard types of microphones that you're going to find in every single studio. You don't have to go out and spend extra money if you don't have it. This will work for you just fine. There's definitely ways to make this stuff sound great. There's some built-in effects on the amps. Most of the amps have them, even some of the models that don't actually have these kinds of effects. For instance, like the Brown Head, which looks a little strange, but if I'm not mistaken, this is basically the PV5150 amp model. And on it, it has tremolo and vibrato and reverb, which that amp obviously doesn't have. But basically across all of these amps, it's adding these extra little bits of what like sort of built-in effects that you would see in some amps. But overall, in my opinion, the clean tones sound super nice. And speaking of clean tones, that's going to lead us right into the next plugin, and that's going to be the Chromaverb reverb that's built in. This thing is stupid powerful. I don't even scratch the surface of what this plugin is capable of. I just kind of come in, dial a couple of things, dial in my wet to dry ratio, and just sort of run with it. This thing sounds awesome without really needing to tweak anything. All right, that's enough of the clean tones. Let's get back into that heavy stuff. But before we do me a solid, hit that like button and subscribe. I'm posting up stuff like this all the time. The last plugin that I want to talk about is a secret weapon of mine. I use it all the time on my leads. It creates a massive amount of space. It changes your entire perception of how things should fit in the mix. And that is going to be the sample delay. This delay is not the kind of delay that you would normally expect when you hear the word delay referring to guitar. This delay, instead of it echoing, what it does is it actually changes the sample rate of when your left and right signal start and stop. So basically, you can go over here and set it in samples or milliseconds for how long you want one side to be delayed from the other. This works really great with vocals. It works really great on guitar. It's really great for stereo panning things when you only have one signal. Now, of course, when you're recording guitar, just record 2 tracks or 4 tracks, whatever you're using for your rhythms that are panned left and right. But if you're in a pinch or you're doing some live stuff that you need that stereo sound, this could help you out with it. Let's have a listen to this riff again. Let's hear what it sounds like as it's recorded in mono, and then we'll switch this thing on and off, and you tell me if you hear the difference. So you can hear how it went from centered to wide, and it almost sounded like 2 guitarists were playing. Again, I don't recommend using this for rhythm guitars per se, but for this example, it works pretty well because you really hear the difference. Like I said, this works really great with leads to give it that sort of wide kind of panned out effect, and it works great for vocals as like a doubler. So the next time you're in the middle of your mix and you're trying to do some cool creative soundscaping, try this guy out. Play around with the sample rates. Just know that 1 needs to stay to 0 if you don't have a center track somewhere else. So drop it on your tracks, give it a try.